So, welcome to the Introduction to Student Finance session. Um, Thank you very much for everybody who's attending. So, firstly, just to introduce myself, my name is John Lees and I'm the External Liaison Officer at the Lifelong Learning Centre. And I'm doing the session along with my colleague Paul. Paul, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paul. I'm the Student Support Officer at the Lifelong Learning Centre. I am also an accredited student money advisor as well. So while John's going to be doing the main presentation, I'll be on hand with that student money advisor hat on, giving both information within the session, but also answering any specific questions in the chat room.
So, thank you very much, Paul. So, this session really is to give you an overview of studying and student finance. Also, we'll be looking at what you could be eligible for, things around the student loan, the maintenance loan, and tuition loan. It's also a really good opportunity for you to ask any questions that you may have, and feel free to do that in the chat function. If they are more specific, it may be a case that we kind of have a one-to-one chat with you at a later date, but feel free to ask any questions that you have in our session in the chat function. So the first things first, really, what Paul and I would like to know is a little bit about yourselves. So what you're applying for, and also whether you're thinking of applying for part-time or full-time study. So in the chat function, if you are all okay in just letting us know what course or subject area you think you want to apply for, and also if you think you're going to apply for it full-time or if you're potentially thinking about part-time instead. So brilliant, Tracy. Thank you very much for letting us know. Child nursing, full time. Yep, got some answers there. Carl, thank you very much. International relations. Ola Watterson, child nursing, full time. Brilliant. Rue, music technology or production. Snow, teaching, part time. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Mechanical field, part-time course in the mechanical field. Amir is thinking about biomedical or chemical sciences, part-time. Great stuff, and thank you very much, Aisha. Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies. So as Paul said as well, quite a good mix there of different courses, part-time and full-time courses. So we'll make sure to touch on both part-time and full-time study at the session here today. Paul will probably be able to give us a little bit of information about how part-time study might affect your eligibility for certain things as well. And Layla, thank you very much. Part-time professional, preparation for higher education, and Sarah in the medical field as well. Okay, brilliant. So the session really, brilliant, Sean. Thank you very much. Teaching and Learning Foundation course, a foundation degree. So the session really, what we're going to go over today, looks at really three different key areas. So what do you already know? What do you want to know? And really, what do you need to know as well before you apply? It's worth saying as well that at the moment, full-time applications for student finance for this September are now open. So you could actually submit an application as soon as you come out of this session. Part-time will be a little later on, around about June time it will open, but we'll come back to that. So feel free, as I mentioned, throughout the session to ask any questions. Paul will be periodically checking the chat function and we'll be answering any questions that we have over there. But feel free to ask any questions you have. So kind of think really the first question about what do you need to know about student finance really kind of boils down to four specific areas. What is it going to cost you? How are you going to pay for it? How much are you going to get? And then also, where do you actually start? So the first thing is how, what could you potentially get? What monies are there out there that's available? So the first thing, and how are you going to pay for it? So the first way the majority of people are going to pay for it is through a tuition fee loan. Now, tuition fees is the main first cost that you're going to encounter with going to university. Now, each university is going to charge a different amount of money for their actual tuition fees per year. But the main thing to remember really is that as long as you're eligible for a tuition loan, the tuition loan will be paid directly to the university, and you wouldn't have to pay for that yourself in any way. It's really important to know as well that you're not expected to pay up front for going to university, and you're not expected to have the cash to be able to pay for your fees. As long as you're eligible, Student Finance England will provide that for you. So the second thing that potentially thinking about what university is going to cost you is around your study costs, which again can vary quite dramatically from course to course. So for example, if you were doing a health related course, I know there's some people looking at mental health nursing or nursing courses or potentially medical courses, you may do a lot of placements. You'd have to think about what is it going to cost me to get to that placement, particularly if it's further away than you need to travel to go to university. If you're thinking about doing a scientific course, perhaps you'd need laboratory equipment, such as lab coats or other materials. Also, additional things to think about what it's going to cost you to go into university is around whether you're going to be borrowing books from the library or whether actually you want to buy them so you have them all the time. Would you need a laptop to help you with your studies as well? Now, also another big factor for a lot of people is children and childcare arrangements. You have to think as well that if you would normally look after your children during the time you're now going to be studying, how would you pay for childcare costs such as nurseries or creches? And the same with any disability or learning difference that you have. Perhaps if you suffer from something, learning difference, you might need some additional support while you're studying, such as a laptop. And how would you get the money for that to pay for it? It's important, however, to say we're going to cover a lot of this in the session, and we're going to look at avenues of essentially, financial support that you can gain access to help with any childcare arrangements that you need to make, to help with any additional needs or additional support you need because of a disability or a learning difference. And another thing to think about is money you may need to live on as well while you're studying. So again, this will vary from person to person, but while you're studying, you're probably still going to need to pay your rent and your mortgage. If you have a car, you're still going to need to pay for the running of the car. And any additional habits that you're going to have to pay for. Factor all these in when you're thinking about how much is it going to cost you to go to university. So how would you pay for going to university is, I guess, the next big question. So unless you have a spare £30,000 behind the sofa, the majority of people are going to get a loan from the government to pay for their tuition fee loan, and also potentially look at getting a loan for living fee costs as well. Your tuition fee loan, as I previously mentioned, is what you're going to be paying your fees for to the university. That'll go directly from Student Finance England to the university that you're applying for. And it's not means tested. So what we mean by that is that they will not look at your household income to decide whether you're eligible or not for a tuition loan. As I mentioned, you don't need the cash up front to go to university. Nobody's expecting you to have the cash to pay for it. As long as you're eligible, that's what Student Finance will provide. The next thing is your living costs. So this is for everything that else is going to be going on with your life. So it could be for paying for essentially your maintenance while you're studying. Now, this is partly means tested, and we'll come on to what that means in a little bit. But essentially, it's support you can get from the government to pay for anything additional that you may need to while you're studying. So it could be your rent, it could be bills, it could be anything at all. And both are repayable with interest. However, you only start to pay it back once you earn over around about £26,500 when you finish your degree course. And you only pay a percentage of from what you earn over that amount. It's around about 9%. And after 30 years as well, any remaining debt that you have with your student loan, if you paid a little bit or a lot of it off, is completely, utterly wiped. It's worth me saying actually as well that with the threshold of the £26,000, if you earn less than that amount when you finish studying, you don't pay anything back to the student loans company. And if you paid nothing back after 30 years, the debt would still be wiped. So it's very, very different to any other loan that you could possibly take out, I would say. And it doesn't go on your credit files either. It's not going to incur debt collectors or anything like that. And it doesn't pass over to any family members. I guess the reason I'm kind of being quite or letting you know about this is because I think there's a lot of people who have a misconception about student loan, and that it's going to, give you crippling debts that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your working life, and it's simply not the case. Martin Lewis, who does the money saving expert TV show on ITV and also has a great website, talks a lot about this, and it's more of a graduate contribution rather than a tax. I don't know, Paul, if you want to kind of chip into that a little bit. Can you hear Paul? Well, anyway, I guess the main thing to remember really and to realise is that it's
Hi,
unlike.
John.
Are you here, Paul?
Yeah, sorry, my microphone wasn't working there. I think you're right. I think the government have done students a disservice by referring to this as a loan, as interest, as debt. I think Layla in the chat room there has asked a great question. So it's like a tax, and this is exactly what it is. When I get paid, my payslip tells me how much has been deducted for income tax, for national insurance, and students on for going to uni, depending on how much they earn. It isn't a debt like a bank loan. It isn't going on your credit files. This is a tax. The only reason that the government aren't using the word tax is because governments don't like using the word tax. So yeah, I think when we think about it in the same way as income tax and national insurance, that then it starts to be a little bit clearer in our minds.
Thank you very much, Paul. So yeah, just to reiterate what Paul said there, in case anybody was having problems hearing him, it's much more like a tax in the sense of, in the same way that your national insurance contributions or your income tax is taken out of your pay slips. It's done automatically, so it's exactly the same way with your student loan. It will be deducted automatically before you actually get your pay, so it's not something in most cases that you have to do yourself. Very, very different to any type of loan that you take out before. So we will move on to the next section. So from the government, as I mentioned, you can get a tuition loan to cover your fees, and you can get a maintenance loan for your living costs. But what you can also get are additional support, or you can get additional support from the government for any additional needs that you may have around disability support and support for dependents. Now, these are grants, so it's slightly different to the loan in the sense of the money you would be able to get for disability support and support for dependents, you don't have to pay that back. It's a non-repayable grant. So essentially, that would be money that wouldn't be added on to your final loan total. Now you can get additional support for disabilities support. Now this is not means tested, so they're not looking at your household income. You don't have to repay it back, and it can be support for study costs that could be linked to your course, and it's paid directly to the provider that you would be taking that stuff from. Paul, are you wanting to jump in there?
Yeah, I think those two things that want people to get when we use the word disability, and when the university or student finance, medical conditions, mental health, dyslexia, dyspraxia. So if you see the word disability, yourself out of a long-term medication. The other thing there around the support for dependents, certainly the bit about the childcare grant for up to 85% of childcare costs, that's only available to not part-time students.
So just in case anybody missed that, that's the additional childcare grant, which we'll come on to in a minute, is only available for full-time students, not part-time students, unfortunately. And as Paul mentioned as well, the universities use the term disability, but if you, as Paul mentioned, if you have any kind of learning difference, it could be dyslexia, dyspraxia, for example, mental health condition, long-term health condition, then make sure that that you look into this further to see if there's any additional support you can get. It's worth saying as well that, irrespective of whatever university you decide to apply for, get in contact with the disability support team. Every university will have one, and they can provide a lot of additional information before you even start at that university. Is where I would say get in contact with them as early as possible. It's probably worth me just saying on that note, actually, that Paul and I are very, very to answer any questions that you have, and they don't have to be related to the University of Leeds. Irrespective of what university you want to go to, feel free to ask any questions. So the second thing is support for dependents. Now, this can be children or adults. A child is generally classed as somebody who is in under 20, who is in full-time education, and it's not means tested, so we're not looking again at your household income. You don't have to pay it back, and that could be an additional £1,500 per year. It's not per child, however, it's just per year, irrespective of how if you have more than one child. And on top of that, there's additional support in the form of what's called a childcare grant, which can be used to pay up to 85% of the childcare costs, and that's paid directly to the creche or nursery who will be looking after them. As Paul mentioned, however, that is just for full-time students only. It's not applicable to part-time students. So, next section is looking again at how you're going to pay for it, but we'll be looking at a slightly different area now. So this will not be from student loans company and additional support you might be able to get access to that's away from government loans or bursaries from the government. So, as we mentioned, a grant or a bursary is a non-repayable amount of money that you could get access to. A lot of universities have their own grants and bursaries that you could have access to. And to be honest with you, there's a completely different criteria for many of them. We always say in section, it's really, really important that you have a look what's out there, because there are a lot of free pots of money that you could essentially get access to that could make a big difference to your studies. And to give you an example, at the University of Leeds, we have the Leeds Financial Support Scheme, which is, and I think it's up to about £2,000 per year that you wouldn't have to pay back, that you could get as cash, that could help you use it for whatever you want. But it's based on your household income. And I think it goes from around about, is it £25,000 to about £50,000, Paul? And it will be a sliding scale what you'll be able to get from there. As I said, you don't have to pay it back as well, and it can make a big difference to people. Now, this is one example at the University of Leeds, and there will be more examples at different universities. So what I can't do, and Paul can't do today, is speak about all the different universities that you could potentially go to. But there will be a lot of additional support that you might be able to get access to. It's really worth doing your research and seeing what you could be eligible for, whether that be a scholarship, whether that be a grant, whether that be a pot of money to you through your studies. It's probably worth me mentioning as well that there's not just additional support from universities. There's also additional support from outside the universities that you might be able to get access to. There's a great website called the Scholarship Hub, which I will link to now, and it has some great examples there of how you could potentially get additional support and additional money from, it could be trusts, it could be organisations, it could be businesses, it could be charities that are going to provide money to students for a wide criteria of reasons. It could be academic, they're looking for people to study certain degree courses. I saw one yesterday actually that were offering financial support to students who worked in retail or had a family member that worked in retail. I've also seen ones that that were based on a certain Scottish surname that you could apply for if you had that surname. So there's really, really a wide variety of different scholarships, bursaries and loans that you could get access to. And it's worth doing your research. Phone up the university, or perhaps in circumstances, email them, see what they have available, look on websites, because it's free money that you could get access to that could make a big difference on your studies. And I guess the reason we kind of reiterate that is because a lot of people don't know and don't take up this opportunity. So do your research and see what's available and find out what's out there. So a big question that we get a lot is how long can you get funding for a degree course? Now this is particularly for full-time students. However, I'm sure Paul can let us know a little bit about part-time as well. So generally you can get funding for the normal duration of your course plus a gift year. So essentially the normal duration of your course can include any of the following. It could be a foundation year, a work placement, you could do a year abroad, you could do an integrated master's. In fact, it could include all of them. That's still the normal duration of your course. What student finance also then do is they will say, we'll give you an extra year if you have a false start, if you have a repeat year, if things go wrong in your first year and you decide to do a different degree program. Now, if you've previously been to university in the United Kingdom before, any previous study will be deducted from the amount of funding that you could get access to. Paul, I don't know if you want to kind of chip in there with anything about part-time study.
Yeah, and hopefully people will be able to hear me. I think there is a little bit of a difference with part-time study in it doesn't work on normal duration plus a gift year. A little flexibility. It's quite complicated. You would get full-time equivalent of the course would be. So if you're studying part-time, for example, on a course that would need 3 years to study full-time, you would be eligible for 12 years worth of funding. Actually, I think the message there is if you're studying part-time, you should be fine, even if you've done some previous study. I think full.
Sorry, Paul, we've lost you there. Perhaps we will come back to that, and perhaps Paul, you might be able to maybe, if you've got a chance, just type maybe a little bit of something up in the text section so people for whom it would be applicable to could perhaps read it. So yeah, the main thing there is part-time studies is slightly different. Generally, you would get there's additional circumstances around that which Paul will let us know about. So how much could you get as well is a big question that a lot of people have, and the honest answer is that everybody who's listened to this session now is going to be different from one another. The best way to find out is to submit an application as early as you can. There's no one size fits all model that we can really say. It's based on a number of different criteria to what you could be eligible for. A really nice and easy way, however, to have a quick kind of look of seeing what you could be eligible for is through the student finance calculator, which I put a link to now in the text in the chat section. It's really fast. You can do it in a couple of minutes, and you can get an idea of what you could be eligible for from student finance. Still worth, however, kind of, make sure you submit the application still, irrespective of what it says in the finance calculator, and don't take it as gospel. But it gives you a good idea of what you could be eligible for. So we've got some great questions in the text section as well, which is brilliant. Keep them coming as well. Any questions that you have, just let us know, and we can answer them as we go along. Yeah, and apologies for the audio problems that we're having today. Can only apologise about this. And any questions you have after the session, just do get in touch with us after as well. So I will carry on while Paul answers your questions in the chat section. So we're now going to look at eligibility for student finance. This is a very big question. If you have any kind of follow-up questions around it, just let us know. So you can essentially apply for student finance, but you have to meet 3 criteria in order to be eligible. The first one is your immigration status is looked at. Second one is your residency is looked at, and the third one is previous study. So as I mentioned, if you've previously been to university before. So firstly, your immigration status. If you're a UK national, so a UK passport holder, if you have indefinite leave to remain in the UK, or if you're an EU national, you would tick that first box for immigration status. Anything else would be a maybe, and we'd have to look into it. The second section that student finance will look at regarding eligibility is your residency. So to be eligible for student finance, you have to have been living in the UK for 3 years immediately before starting your course. And if you're an EU national, you need to have lived in the EU for 3 years and the UK for 5 years to be eligible for a maintenance loan and a tuition loan. And if you previously been to university before, any study that you've done is deducted from how long you can get funding for. So to give you a bit of an example on that, if you went to university for 2 years, they would deduct 2 years worth of funding from what you'd be eligible for the normal duration of your degree course. Now the next section is looking at, I think, what Carl has asked with regards to household and who is household. Now this is to do with your maintenance loan. So it's not the tuition loan. As long as you're eligible for the tuition loan, you'll be able to receive the full amount of the cost of your course. The maintenance loan is your living costs. So Sean, thanks for joining us. Let us know if you have any connectivity problems. So key factors that student finance will look at with regards to deciding whether how much you get for your maintenance loan is age. And this is about who counts as your household. So if you're under 25, your parents' income will class as your household income. So by that we mean your parents, for example, and the only exception to that generally is if you're married yourself, if you're divorced, if you have children of your own, if you have been financially independent from your parents and you can prove it 36 months before you start your course, or if you've been estranged from your parents. And by that we generally mean if there's got to be a legitimate reason which student finance would want evidence of why you're no longer in contact with your parents. Everything else will be based on your parents' income, even if you don't live with them, unfortunately. Why Student Finance England choose the 25 and under, or under 25, should I say, I don't know, but unfortunately it's just what they decide to do. If you're over 25 or you're 25 and over, it would be classed on your partner's income, your spouse's income, or civil partner's income to make the decision on what you could be eligible for student finance. Now, they wouldn't be looking at a housemate, for example. So if you live with a brother or sister or a best friend, that wouldn't be taken into account. It would just be if you live with a partner, a spouse, or for example, a civil partner. What you can get from student finance for your maintenance loan is on a sliding scale depending on the income of your household. The minimum that you'd be able to get if you provided no information about who is your household and how much the household income is around about £3,000 per year. The maximum is around about, off the top of my head, about £8,000 or so per year. Now, your household income is not taken into account. So whatever you earn, if you, for example, got a part-time or a full-time job, Student Finance England will not look at that to make a decision on how much maintenance loan to provide you. Your income is always nil for the purposes of student finance. That is unless you have unearned incomes, such as rental properties, or you have dividends and shares and stocks and things like that. If you're over 59, then unfortunately you would only be eligible for a capped maintenance loan. So if you're 16 above, you would only get that minimum amount per year that I spoke about, which is about £3,500. So yeah, Katie, you put that if you live apart from your parents and you're under 25, their income is still considered. That is the case unless you can prove that you've been financially independent from your parents for 36 months, or you're married, or you're divorced, or you have children of your own. So Carl's asking if you're over 25 but you still live with your parents. Sorry, bear with me one moment. And a single, how would that work? So that would, Paul, I wonder if Paul could answer that perhaps. It's a good question, actually, a very good question, Carl.
Yeah, I'll come back to that on the chat. I'll answer that one on the chat room. No.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, just to recap very quickly, if you're under 25, parents' income, over 25, partner, spouse, civil partner's income. If you have a partner, spouse, civil partner, over 59, you're only eligible for the capped maintenance loan. As I previously mentioned, it doesn't affect your tuition loan. So as long as you still get the full amount of your tuition loan. But it's if you have any further questions, put them in the chat. Paul, Jenny, or I will answer it for you. So it's probably worth saying as well that there's a lot of people have a lot of questions around the eligibility for student finance and about who your household income is. So don't feel free to ask us any questions after this session as well, and we can look into it in more detail for you if you have any, not sure if you fit any of those criteria or not. Can certainly look into that for you. So key factors to think about when you're applying for student finance is that the fees are going to be different from university to university. There are bursaries and scholarships, so that's free money you don't have to pay back, available. But the onus is on you guys really to have a look and see what's out there and see what you're eligible for. As I mentioned, they can be on academic, ability or what you've previously studied and what grades you got. It could be on your age. It could be on, as I mentioned, if you previously worked in retail, there's a wide variety of different things it could be. And it's really onus is on you to see what's out there and what you could be eligible for. The location of the university that you're going to go to as well can make a difference on how much student maintenance loan that you could be eligible for. If you study in London, you'll be getting a slightly higher maintenance loan than if you studied away from London. It's roughly about £1,000 per year additional financial support you could get access to. And if you live at home for your studies and you don't move out of the family home, you will get a slightly lower amount than if you did move away. Again, it's around about £1,000 less per year that you'd be eligible for. Probably worth me saying as well that the maintenance loan will be paid to you in 3 installments throughout the year. So you will get your maintenance loan first in September, then you get one at Christmas in January, and then you get one in the final term around about May time. So it's split into 3 sections, and that will be the same in all the years that you're studying at university. So as I mentioned, your dependents, if you have dependents, or children or adults who are dependent on you, you could potentially be eligible for additional support from student finance. When you're filling in your student finance loan application form, it'll actually flash up and say, do you consider yourself to have a dependent? It'll also ask you if you consider yourself to have a disability. If you do, then tick yes, and it'll take you through to an additional application form or section of the application form. I would say, as Paul mentioned, disability is a very broad term when it comes to universities. So, if you have a learning difference, if you have a mental health condition, long-term health condition, disability, certainly apply and see if you could get any additional support. It is just, however, for your study costs. So it wouldn't be for anything outside of university. It's more for, one example would be if you perhaps dyslexia, and perhaps it takes you longer to make notes. There could be additional support for that. Perhaps in Scribe, could be recording equipment, it could be a laptop, and that money is paid directly to the provider. So who is your household income as well, as we touched on? Under 25 parents, 25 and over, it's your partner, your spouse, civil partner, and The only income that's going to be counted are the parents' or the partner's income. So not looking at housemates and not looking at your own income as well. That would always be classed as nil for the purpose of student finance. So full-time applications are open now. So anybody who's thinking of applying for a full-time course, get your application in as early as possible, I would say. And certainly with current circumstances, I would say try and apply as early as you can, so there's plenty of time, firstly to find out what you're going to be eligible for and to make sure that you've got that student finance in place for September. But secondly, also in case that they require any additional information from you, it can sometimes take weeks and weeks if they require you to send in a passport or anything additional like that. So do it as early as possible. Part-time applications, they haven't confirmed the date of when they're going to open yet, but we expect it to be around about June time. Now, student finance calculator, as I previously mentioned in the chat, is a great way of just having a really quick snapshot of what you could be eligible for. Gives you a good estimation, so do use that as well. And as I mentioned, check university websites for the fees of how much it's going to cost you per year for the course. Everybody's studying different courses, so potentially people will be paying different fees per year, especially part-time and full-time will be different. And also look for scholarships and bursaries as well. While I'm actually speaking about bursaries, one thing that we haven't touched on today is the NHS bursary. Before everything has happened, things that have happened this year, and just after Christmas, Boris Johnson advised that he was going to, the government were going to be granting an additional £5,000 per year to NHS students, so students who were studying nursing, midwifery, and a variety of other courses that they wouldn't have to pay back. Now, we're still waiting on information around that, but potentially it's looking like any healthcare students who are studying nursing, midwifery, or a variety of other courses which can cover things like radiography, physiotherapy, podiatry, could get this additional £5,000 per year. We're still waiting on confirmation about that, and as soon as we know, we will be in contact and we'll let you know. If you have any questions around this, do get in touch with us. I'll provide a link to our Padlet resource as well, which has got a link to the NHS Learning Support Fund's website as well, which has more information on this. Now, on top of this, there's additional support from the NHS in the guise of the Learning Support Fund, which can cover financial support around children. If you have childcare, it could be an additional £1,000 per year you could get access to. They could also cover additional financial support if you have a long way to travel to a play, for example, cover the travel costs. And they also offer a hardship fund. Now, we expect that to still be applicable as well for September, as the additional £5,000. And on top of that, there's actually more money available if you potentially study a degree course, which they need a lot of professionals working in that sector or in a particular area of the country. The reason we can't kind of give you concrete information yet, however, is because we're still waiting on the government to actually iron all that out. And at the moment, with everything that's going on, it could take quite a bit of time. So keep your eye out for that. And as I said, I'll send a link to the online resource, which has a link to the Learn Support Fund. So if that's applicable to you, do have a look at it. And in fact, how about that? As if by magic, there's a link at the bottom of the screen that you should see now. So the Lifelong Learning Centre Student Finance Resource Bank. So thank you very much for listening today to the session. And I think we still have some questions in the chat function, which I believe Paul is answering. But please do let us know any other questions that you have in that chat function, and we can certainly answer them for you now. So also, Paul has provided a useful link to the learning support funding as well, which I was speaking about. So do have a look at that if it's applicable to you. I know there's some participants who are looking particularly at mental health nursing, adult nursing as well. So do have a look at that, and it's got some good information on there, and hopefully it's going to mean that there'll be a lot of additional support for those students from September onwards, and that will be £5,000 per year as well. So if we have any more questions, do type them into the chat section. As Paul mentioned, we've had some really good questions, which I believe Paul answered. So while you're doing that, just popped up a how useful did you find the session? If you could just let us know by choosing 1 to 5 how useful you found the session, it would be really helpful for us to know for the future, what went well and if you found the session useful or not. So, Layla, you were saying that you'll have access to this information after the course ends. Is this after this session, or is that particular to a course? Oh, brilliant, Jenny's answer. Anyway, we will be sending a recording of the session. Brilliant. I'm glad everybody found it useful as well. So just to let you know a couple of things. Bear with me 2 moments. Going to stop recording.